I'm John Biggs. This is all my information up here. If you Google me, I'm the first guy on Google now who's John Biggs. There used to be some Australian guy who was me before I was there. And I was very upset with this Australian guy for years. And then finally I've knocked him out. He's like 86. He seems like a nice enough guy. This is all my information, john@freemit.com, @JohnBiggs on Twitter, East Coast editor of TechCrunch. I don't have a lot of time, so I don't want to get too much into the bio, but I've followed blockchain since essentially its inception. I wrote one of the first evergreen papers on how to mine with a Raspberry Pi. So I've had a Raspberry Pi computer under my desk for a few years now, and I make at least 25 cents a year on this thing. So Bitcoin is really taking off here, especially based on my own personal experience. I like to tell this story. This is an interesting story about innovation. Back in the old days, when they used to want to turn meat over a fire, you used to have to move it by your hands. So you had some guy standing there spinning your meat for you. Then they did a little bit of innovation, and they created something called the turn-spit dog. And I say that they created because this was literally a genetic engineered dog that these folks had bred over the past over decades to create a tiny dog that could fit inside a wheel. You see him up there? And this wheel is connected to the meat down here. And that was the best solution for turning meat on a spit for hundreds of years. A dog inside of a wheel that has to run really, really fast. Now, I wonder if we can connect this to the payments industry. It's going to be very, very difficult, I'm sure, because it's an advanced and non-benighted industry at all. But that's a dog up there. And if the dog had to go to the bathroom, there's a lot of people underneath that dog, so you just had to deal with it. Then, a few years later, 1700s, 1600s, you created a system for slowing down the release of energy in a spring or in a pendulum or in a weighted system. We've all seen this. It's a grandfather clock going back and forth. But the grandfather clock, the mechanism of grandfather clock, was originally designed to slow meat down as it was spinning and to spin the meat automatically. So you no longer had to genetically engineer a living animal, connect it to your meat, and make that animal spin. You're able to use a clock-like mechanism to do that. And this was about 1700s. So for 300, 400 years, you were using a dog, and all of a sudden, everything changed. And then you got stuff like this. This is a pocket watch. 1800s. This is one of the most complex pocket watches ever made. It's massively complex, and it's all because somebody didn't want a dog over their food. The street finds its own uses for things. Technology is changing so quickly that it's extremely easy for folks who are suffering under an old system, a dog that's going to put stuff onto your food, to take this technology and expand it into their own and solve their own problems with this technology. The street finds its own uses for things. In this specific case, this picture is the street finding some interesting uses for ATM machines, for example. This is a very, very small pin pad attachment that you can put on top of an ATM machine. I don't believe it's a positive thing when this happens to your ATM machine, but it's definitely a concern for a lot of people have. And the fact that you're able to stick all sorts of electronics into a wafer-thin piece of metal means that things are changing massively rapidly in this space. So here's our agenda. We don't have a lot of time. You guys are just, it's 3 in the morning for me. Do you understand this? I'm very, very sleepy. I need a little feedback. There's somebody smiling over there. And there's somebody back there who's excited as well. And this guy right here. Thank you, thank you. I came in at 2 in the morning, and your line at the airport was so long. I didn't understand. Blockchain, robots, financial app marketplaces, the underbanked. No hugs. Sorry, no hugs. Blockchain. So when you hear about blockchain, you hear about this guy. You hear about Satoshi. And it's all this crazy garbage that it's going to change. It's created by the NSA, and that the ninjas will come to your house if you use blockchain, and it's a really terrible thing. That's a trap. That's a trap created by folks who are trying to sell blockchain in a very, very, very specific and special way. Can you read the Dilbert cartoon? Is that good for you guys? It's a little bit small. Can you read this? It's good. It's funny. And the things that we need to remember about blockchain is that A, everybody's investing in it. This is sort of the avalanche of investment. And what happens when a big company like Visa and MasterCard invests in something? What happens when that takes place? It's sort of like the Borg. I don't know if you guys have seen Star Trek, where they take over an entire ship and turn everybody into robots. That's exactly what's kind of happening right now. So all of this exciting Satoshi stuff, this guy, this poor guy, and all the exciting hipstery aspects to blockchain are slowly but surely being eaten. So here are the important things that we need to remember about blockchain. The Lightning Network is going to speed up transactions. That's happening right now, and you're going to be able to do all sorts of transactions that you weren't able to do before. It's still not as fast as a Visa MasterCard system, but that's because those guys have had a few dozen years to build out their systems. I think things are going to catch up. Bitcoin is not illegal in most countries, which is a good thing, I guess. Most countries being the two important words there. But you can still use it in ways that aren't related to Bitcoin. Building your own blockchain, your own personal blockchain, is really, really silly. It's akin to downloading like a really nice database system and installing it yourself, but you're not connected to the network. You get none of the benefits. You get none of the proof of work benefits, all that other good stuff. We can go into a little more detail later. Most of the noise about Bitcoin will go away over the next few years, and that's not a good thing, because what's going to happen is that the big banks are going to swallow up this technology, and they're going to swallow up all the developers, and they're going to swallow up the ideas, and they're going to take these ideas. And I see this already. And the wave is cresting in blockchain right now, and it could crash pretty soon. And also believe but verify the hype. So this is really interesting. 21.com raised $116 million. $116 million. So you figure 21.com has probably the best software out there for handling Bitcoins, right? It's going to be amazing. This is their user interface. So this is literally their biggest product, this screen. It's a Bitcoin mining machine that sits under your desk, and it's supposed to do special things. But unless you have a PhD in computer science, you have no idea what's going on. It's this small because it literally doesn't matter what it says on the screen. Because if I got $116 million and I gave you guys this product, I suspect you would be angry with me. But nobody's angry with 21 because they just let them go. Because what they're assuming is we're going to hit an AWS-style rise in usage and cache. So Amazon Web Services grew massively over the past decade. And what we see here is now Amazon Web Services is eating the world. The same thing's going to happen here. Are they going to win it with this? I wanted to look at this again because this is so ridiculous that this would be the equivalent of Microsoft Office coming out. We're going to release the new version of Office, and it looks like this. That's literally what just happened with 21. It's really kind of silly. Anyway, robots. Everybody loves robots. So this is an interesting thing. What I see and what I see happening right now is the ability for robots to do a lot of the grunt work of retail shopping. For example, this is a Scott eVest system. This guy makes these vests and things with a bunch of pockets in it. It's for travel. And what he wants to do, and what he's actually building out, is a system that you stand in front of. It measures you. It says what size you should wear. And then you press a bunch of buttons on your phone or on the screen, and it just ships you a bunch of pants and shirts. And it's an onboard system, and there's no interaction. So imagine this being in an airport, for example. You see these cool shirts and things. You don't want to carry them around with you. Maybe you do. Tells you that you need to wear a large. You try on the large. Maybe they have one example of each piece. And this is an entire retail store in a kiosk, in a box about the size of, I don't know, a small closet. Further, Wendy's in the States is replacing most of its cashiers with robots. McDonald's is already doing this in Europe. And then you have cars who are going to start self-driving. If you can imagine a self-driving car moving from one side of the country to the other under no human guidance, that's a pretty crazy concept. The automation of jobs once held by young and middle-aged men will change the world. The automation of these jobs will put millions of people out of work. What happens to those people? We don't know yet. That's the scary thing. Will they get nicer jobs? Will they have no jobs at all? Are we entering some sort of Aldous Huxley-style era of relaxation, and everybody's going to be happy and taking opiates? Potentially. I think that's already happening in the States. Not in any good way. This is an important thing to think about. This is what's happening to truck driving. This is what's happening to transport. This is what's happening to taxi driving. It's also what's happening in retail. FinTech itself is changing the way people are working. Next, we have financial app marketplaces. I was talking with a head of Chase in New York. He was judging on a panel with me. And I said, we were thinking about doing some sort of chat interface to talk about money. And he said, oh, we already have that. He said, they already have a way you can text a few letters to a system somewhere, and you get stuff coming out the other way. So the guy at Chase in 2016 said that their biggest product, their most exciting chat product, was an SMS gateway that allowed you to say, send me my balance, and it would send your balance back. So that was kind of frightening to me. What I really meant was stuff like this. This is a robot that tells you what your financial life looks like at any moment. Here's how your June spending compared to May. This is kind of goofy stuff, but imagine if Chase actually did this as opposed to have a text gateway. Then you have apps that are replacing remittances. This is Revolut, I believe. My company, Freemit, is doing something similar. We're connecting wallets like this to other wallets, putting things together. These wallets allow small companies to start playing in a place that they didn't have access to, in a very powerful place, in a place of control. Finally, you have somebody like Yantra. Yantra is a backbone for a massive number of smaller apps. So you could actually build on top of Yantra, and they have all the controls and all the KYC and all the AML stuff on the back end, and they just supply, and all you have to supply is the front end. Banks become arbiters of trust, and fintech players grab the consumers. Banks become arbiters of trust. Banks exist to spread trust around the world, whereas fintech players grab the consumers. Banks don't have to worry about consumers anymore, for better or worse. A couple more minutes. The underbanked. The underbanked are a primary concern of ours. That's why we started the company. And that's why I actually got into this. I love journalism, but I actually wanted to solve a lot of these problems. Poverty generally is expensive. So an average family spends $2,400 a year on banking products. They don't know why they do it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. If they're not savvy, they can really get screwed up pretty quickly. But things are changing. So you have digital identity, you have transparency, you have control over your credit, and you have more control generally over how you want to interact with banks. So in terms of digital identity, something like e-Estonia, the Estonian ID here, is very, very cool because it allows you to file your taxes in about 40 seconds. It allows you to do all sorts of banking online, and allows you to take control of your experience in ways that weren't there before. You don't have to go get a driver's license. You just basically need this. Going back to the blockchain, one of the primary drivers of a lot of regulation in terms of remittances and in terms of money sending is the lack of transparency. And we're in a situation for hundreds of years. Western Union has been around for about 150 years now. And the reason why it's so regulated is because those guys were trying to hide all sorts of exciting stuff behind the scenes. Once you have a blockchain, once you have a way to trace every single payment from point A to point B, that might not be a lot of fun for folks who are trying to purport fraud or any other garbage. But for the average person to be able to follow those transactions transparently is massively important. That's what the blockchain allows us to do. If you take anything away from this, just remember that. This is the first transparent banking system. And again, if you read the news, a lot of the big banks don't want a transparent banking system, but that's what they got. Then you also have community systems. In the States, you have these interesting things called stashes. So you have some grandmother in an apartment building somewhere. She holds everybody's $20 bills. Every month, you go to the grandma, you drop off 20 bucks. Every month, you do this rain or shine. She comes and yells at you if you don't do it. You have about 10 people putting money into this stash. Then when somebody who is involved in the stash needs cash, if they need $500 to buy new tires, they can go to the grandma and they can get a loan from the stash. It's interest-free, and it's a community system. But the interesting thing about ad hoc systems is it allows you to replicate that in technology without disadvantaging anyone. So we're trying to replace this sort of stuff, somebody who can actually manage things for you. The other interesting thing is that there was a massive move towards check cashing systems like these. And the benefit of these is that all the fees are out in the open. You know exactly what you're going to get, and you're not going to suffer from unusual fees. Further, millennials hate banks. They're tired of banks, and we could argue that they are going to be the first voluntarily underbanked generation. For them, one bank is exactly like the other, and for them, 71% would rather go to the dentist than go to a bank. If you guys don't act, customers will abandon you. Customers will abandon banks, customers will abandon payment platforms, customers will abandon cards. Cards, as pieces of plastic, are interstitial technology. We're just about done with them. And this is exactly what's happening in the developed world. So here's how to solve all this. And this is all kind of obvious, but sometimes it's not. You think, prepare, build, repeat. Over and over again. Use the tools that are available to you. All these amazing tools are now available to you. One of my visions is that somebody in their backyard could build their own ATM system using a Raspberry Pi and a few pieces of code and create a networked ATM connected to an international network. And it's entirely feasible right now because of the security, because of the hardware, because of the control that you have over your own systems. You don't want to be these guys. These guys are the guys who are spinning the meat by hand. These are the guys who are hanging out. They thought their jobs were pretty much secure back in the medieval times. They weren't going anywhere. Look at this. Who else is going to spin the meat for the king? But you actually want to be this guy. This is Abraham Louis Breguet. I wrote a book about this guy. You can actually see it down there, jdbny.me/Marie. You can download it if you want to read it. This is a watchmaker, 17th century, 18th century, who created one of the most complex watches ever made. So from smoked meats to this, and it's a very straight line, and it's happened very, very quickly. Once people figured out that you didn't have to use a dog, or you didn't have to use a dude, and you could use a mechanism, they took to it very quickly, and they created some of the most beautiful mechanical artwork in the world. No hugs, sorry. This is my information, and I think we're good, right?
Take one question.
Sure.
Time is very, very tight today, but I know a lot of people are very keen to hear from John. We'll take one question. We've got a microphone here. Don't waste this opportunity. John's got 35,000 followers on Twitter who would love to be asking him a question now, so don't waste this opportunity. I've got thousands of questions. I ask questions for a living. 3. Have we got one over there? Yes, please.
Thank you, John. Probably a direct question. Is Bitcoin or blockchain, is it equally an opportunity also for hackers or for cybersecurity?
So I guess the question is it secure? Interestingly, blockchain Bitcoin is the most secure transmission system that exists. One of the founders of Zappo, Wences Casares, he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to solve that issue, trying to ask that question: is this thing secure? Implemented in the proper way, implemented in the most basic and open source way, it's massively secure. If you take it off and you splinter it and you put it into your own organization and you try to figure, I got my own special blockchain, it's not so secure. If you actually use the proof of work system, it's immutable and really, really interestingly secure.
Thanks very much indeed, John. Right. Any more questions? You saw John's Twitter handle, @JohnBiggs. We're going to have to leave it there, but you can ask a question. John's going to be around at the conference for a while. Yeah. And of course, there's the hashtag payments.ae @JohnBiggs. Thanks very much indeed. Fascinating hearing from you this morning.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.